While coaching is certainly an important factor in a team's success or lack thereof, and while some coaches in the league certainly deserve to be fired when their team is showing little to no progress or even taking steps backwards, we've gotten to a place now where coaches have become the ultimate scapegoat in a given team's failures. So much so that even if you coach your team to a championship, you could very well find yourself out of a job in a matter of a couple seasons thereafter. Safe to say, no NBA coach is safe no matter what your history, your resume, your accolades. Owners and GMs have a short leash on coaches right now that even if your team marginally disappoints, and even if it's not really the coach to blame, they're out of there. And this offseason is case in point with the firings of Nick Nurse, who just won the title in 2019, Mike Budenholzer, who won a title just 2 seasons ago in 2021, and more recently, which I think is the worst firing of them all, Monty Williams, who took the Suns from a lottery team to the NBA Finals in just 1 season, and then winning Coach of the Year just last season after the Suns finished with the best record in the league. And while I get sometimes personnel changes need to happen at the coaching level, sometimes we do need to take a step back and place some accountability on not only the players, but the front office that constructed the teams in the first place. If you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, coaches getting fired isn't something new. Teams will get rid of coaches at the time of a hat. You've had coaches last all but 1 season with their respective teams. Stan Van Gundy in his lone season with the Pelicans is an example of that. But more recently, you're seeing a trend of actual good coaches who've had success be canned after a bad playoff run. It's wild to think that the coaches who won a title in 2019, 2020, and 2021 have all already been fired. Nick Nurse and Budenholzer getting fired this year, Frank Vogel getting fired last year after the Lakers missed the play-in. Here's the thing. While all these firings sure can be justified when you look at the disappointing seasons that they had that led to their firing, you can't ignore the poorly constructed rosters for which they had to work with. Frank Vogel as an example. Yeah, he's not a good coach, and it probably was best to let him go. But are we really going to sit here and act like the garbage roster Rob Pelinka put together around LeBron and obviously an always injured Anthony Davis was going to somehow go on a championship run? That Westbrook trade is still one of the worst trades that came out of that offseason, and the Lakers were still bad even after Darvin Ham took over, trending towards missing the play-in again. But when they shook up the roster at the trade deadline, finally bringing in some shooting, better defenders, wouldn't you know it, they turned things around and started looking better. Credit to Darvin Ham, because he has done a great job at managing the egos of that team and now taking them to the conference finals. But that was on Rob Pelinka for the poor roster he put together after the 2020 title and letting key role players go like Alex Caruso, Kyle Kuzma, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Now, as for the guys like Nick Nurse and Mike Budenholzer, I mean, I've personally always thought that Bud was a bit of an overrated coach, could produce success in the regular season, but not in the postseason, and he's also just been fortunate to have stars on his team. And yes, the title in 2021 was very impressive, but that also was the benefit of the Bucks doing a great job at putting the right pieces around Giannis, and Giannis just balling out and locked in that postseason. And while I think Bud firing was justified given the embarrassing showing the Bucks had being the #1 seed, losing to the Heat in 5 games, and that collapse in Game 5, not calling timeouts, not having Brook Lopez in on that final possession in regulation to prevent the lob that Jimmy Butler scored to tie the game that put it into overtime, like that was just coaching malpractice. But have to remember, Giannis was out for a good portion of that series, and the players themselves didn't step up and lost all the confidence in that series after finishing with the best record in the NBA. For Nick Nurse, I mean, Nurse is actually a solid coach. Even the 2019 championship aside, finally getting the Raptors over the hump and winning it all with Kawhi Leonard. To me, what was more impressive is last season. When people felt the Raptors were going to be a lottery team and potentially tanking, they exceeded expectations and finished with the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference and gave the Sixers a run for their money in the first round. But what gets overlooked is the roster has some serious flaws. Too many bigs, not enough guards, very scrappy and high energy team on the defensive end, but not enough scoring, not enough shooting. And all the Raptors did was run it back, and it didn't work. Yeah, some of the blame should be on Nick Nurse, but more accountability needs to reside on Masai Ujiri for not doing much to improve the roster, and also on the players, some of which regressed from their previous seasons, guys like Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, and even Gary Trent Jr. But as I said, the most egregious firing, and what prompted me to even make this video, is the Suns firing Monty Williams. Now, I won't lie, I thought that this was a very possible outcome because we know the Suns' new owner is aggressive and wanting to make swift and abrupt changes. And after the Suns failed yet again for the second time, losing in horrible fashion, getting blown out on their own home court in the second round, and after which they added Kevin Durant, you kind of expected that something like this was going to happen, even if it was just simply to make a change to say that they did. I think it's a horrible move and one they're going to regret, but you almost could see it coming. With how much pressure is now on this franchise to win now after going all in on KD, trading 4 first-round picks for him and Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. But this is why firing Monty Williams makes no sense if you're the Suns. Say what you will about Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. 2 of the best players in the game, arguably top 10 players in the league. KD is one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. And when you have 2 star players at that level, yeah, you should probably expect to do better than just getting knocked out of the second round of the playoffs 2 years in a row. But what's being overlooked is the fact that the Suns, after trading for Kevin Durant by moving Johnson and Bridges, have little to no depth on their roster outside of their starters, and even with their starters, they have an aging Chris Paul who can't stay healthy on a large contract at the age of 38, and you have a young center who oftentimes doesn't even seem to care about the game of basketball and makes a little effort in the way of getting better. And I hate to say it, and I know a lot of Suns fans are going to come in here and disagree with this, Booker, as great as he is, and he's been great in the playoffs with some incredible performances, the man cracks under pressure when facing elimination. As Lucas said, everyone talks big when they're up, and Booker plays well when the team is up and comfortable, but back up against the wall, Booker has not shown up well. And I'll even go as far to say the same thing about Kevin Durant. Outside of when he was with the Warriors, because he had a lot of support at that time, Kevin Durant has crumbled a bit when the season is on the line. You saw that in OKC, when the Thunder blew a 3-1 lead to the Warriors, Game 7 in particular, when he was just hoisting up bad shots and shooting the team out of the game. And the same in Brooklyn in that series that they got swept by the Celtics last season. Again, Booker and KD, incredible players, incredible talent, but they have a history of crumbling under pressure. Monty Williams was the winningest coach over the last 4 seasons, better than any other coach in the entire NBA in 4 seasons. He remains one of the winningest coaches in Suns franchise history, and despite a roster in which they had no bench, little outside shooting, a team that was primarily focused operating in the mid-range, skills and strengths that don't translate well in today's NBA that is heavily predicated on three-point shooting and floor spacing, a team that was riddled with injuries throughout the year, even after they traded for KD because he slipped on the court and shoot around, and yet despite all of this, Williams was still able to have a competitive team. But no, it's the coach's fault. Send him on his way. Just mind-boggling to me how much front offices use their coaches as scapegoats for the problems of the team, when in reality, most of the time, it's the roster they created themselves that is the main issue. Some team is going to be lucky to pick up Monty Williams, especially with all the head coaching vacancies around the league. I would love to have him coaching the Bulls, but sadly, we know the front office is obsessed with Billy Donovan and won't fire him for anything. One of the few exceptions where a team will keep a coach around even when firing them is probably the way to go. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.